Money is one of those things that trips up a lot of people, or building wealth trips up a lot of people. But I mean, ultimately, it's a pretty very simple principle. Much of how we build wealth in this world and do well is very simple principle. And that is two things. First of all, and they're kind of contradictory. So, first of all, is I'm freaking awesome. I'm going to like put that out there. Second of all, and stay with me. I know that sounds like it's kind of ridiculous. Um, Second of all, I equally suck. I am equally terrible, and I am a complete disaster. Right. So on the first principle of being, I'm freaking awesome. Right. So if you think about I'm freaking awesome, um, with that particular principle, it's thinking about how can I actually invest in myself because I am a pretty damn good resource with who I am. Right. And so that investing in yourself is thinking about how I can improve my own resources and my outreach and various things like that. Right. So um, if you have this I'm friggin' awesome sort of basic principle, right? So what you should be doing is thinking about how can I both leverage myself and invest in myself so I can actually do a little bit better, right? So thinking about developing the skill set that you actually have, looking at ways that quote unquote you can market that skill set. I don't like that terminology, but looking at ways that you could do outreach or help yourself. So the two basic things that you could be doing on either end of those is on one side, you are getting more education that is very inexpensive and has a big bang for its buck, right? So, what does that mean? A big bang for its buck for inexpensive? It's often looking at things that have a pretty good return, and you can easily find out those particular things. They're generally really simple. Um, there are often things that people talk about a fair bit, but they're things that people actually don't like doing because they're difficult to do, but they talk about. Right, so taking a course, and right now, hyped up things are, and that changes, year to year, decade to decade. But hyped up things could be stuff in the medical profession, like nursing, taking courses in nursing. Um, hyped up things in sort of the information stuff is like software programming, AI right now, these kind of things that are hyped up. They do have decent bang for the buck, and they're relatively, I'm not saying that they're easy, they're kind of miserable often to take. But they don't take that long. They require a great deal of effort, but very few people can take. So sorry about that. Um, my life gets interrupted sometimes. Okay, so equally, you have to be equally. I am awesome, and thinking about how you can invest in those particular resources, the things that are very easy to do, and then on an easy and fairly inexpensive to do, and that's hard to do. I get it. I completely understand. And then on the other side, it's thinking about I equally suck, right? Like I'm not a good person in the sense that it's not that I'm kind-hearted, but um, I'm myself as a resource, as an asset, can equally just stop working or not function the way that one would intend to function. And there's two sort of basic ways to think about that. One is thinking about in the short term, how do I ensure that this resource called myself, I can have money to sort of sustain myself, right? So that is like that's where insurance comes from, the sort of short-term stuff that comes in. But in the very long term, I can think about how myself as a resource might not want to work indefinitely, and that's where I invest and put money into other assets that are not as good as me, but can sustain myself in the long run in case me as an asset doesn't function properly. And those two things, right? So insurance is the short term, less than 10 years. And the reason why you don't just do investment in the long term of transferring wealth from yourself to longer term assets is simply because it takes a while to build up. So eventually, if you do your investing properly and distribute it across many different assets that are not yourself or not one individual asset, that should be relatively self-insured. That you should be able to, if one of your assets, something under your possession, goes, doesn't function or doesn't work, you should be able to have assets in other areas that are going to sustain it and sort of replace that particular thing, right? So then you're essentially self-insured. You don't really need insurance at that point. But early on, you often need insurance for catastrophic problems that happen, right? And that amount that you have, right? So the self-insuring, you need to have a lot of money if there's something catastrophic, right? So for example, um, for health insurance, for example, you will need millions and millions and millions of dollars to self-insure through health insurance. But if you have $100 million or 2 million, $200 million, you can self-insure. Um, but for most of us, we can't, right? So that's why we have that insurance that's there. And the reason is that ourself as an asset, ourself as a thing, doesn't function sometimes, and that can happen early on in our life, or later on in life we decide to pull that asset, right? And that's what retirement is. And we just don't want it to work at that point. We want it to sort of do other things that are for enjoyment that we can actually do, right? So thinking of yourself in this way, I'm equally amazing and equally, I can equally suck on either side, right? I know that these are not great terms, but that's basically it in sort of colloquial terms. So in the, then the next question is how much should you sort of pick in terms of investing in these particular things? Well, it's it's a choice on either end of them, right? So there's no right or wrong answer, but a good estimate is to look at what multinational companies do, right? So multinational companies, large conglomerate companies, will spend, good estimates, um, you know, for marketing. It might be 10% of everything that they bring in is spent on marketing. For investing in yourself, so that's called research and development for multinational firms, and they might spend about 10% ish, right? Maybe it's 20% with these numbers. It sort of depends on who you are. And then on insurance and reinvesting in other areas, that's where you do sort of more longer term things. And for the longer term, or for insurance, is you know, getting the basic things like life insurance, getting the basic things like health insurance, and those basic sort of simple things that you really should need, particularly in America where there's less Social Security. Um, you really need those things. But then you think about, okay, for the very long term investing, right? That's where you're thinking about, I'm investing about 15% of everything that I'm going to make in, 10 to 20%, so 15, in sort of long-term mutual funds and index funds and things like that that are distributed across a number of different companies, so that you are, if one of those companies doesn't do well, then you sort of have a backup plan, right? And that's thinking about you're investing in this different way and thinking about yourself as, I'm equally amazing and equally not amazing, right? Like I suck at any given time, will save you from going through a great deal of pain. If on one side the pain is, you realizing that you can suck, you not do that well, but then on the other side is realizing that in order to grow these assets that you have to sort of leverage them and make them a little better than what they are today, right? And the only way that you can do that is get used to spending resources on yourself and on sort of marketing yourself. I don't like that term, but like, doing different things that might be considered you know, altruistic or not yourself, right? Not about you as an individual. That might be, giving to charity. That might be doing things like I don't know, you know, helping out your neighbors, right? Like devoting some time to just basic things where you focus on other people. Um, so I want you to think about this sort of balance of what it means to leverage your financial resources and thinking about this equally of I'm really damn good and I want to leverage that resource, but then as well as I'm not so good and this asset could actually not work that well. I think thinking about these things in these two different ways allows you to invest better in yourself and allows you to actually have better returns in the long run. All right, take care and have a wonderful day.